Mississippi is a land of vibrant music, rich soil, and a hospitality so thick it can feel like a physical embrace. But if you turn off the interstate and follow the blacktop until the cell signal drops to a single, flickering bar, that embrace can start to feel a lot more like a grip. In the Magnolia State, the off energy isn't just a lack of people, it's a surplus of memory. The air here is heavy, not just with the 98% humidity of a July afternoon, but with the weight of centuries of overlapping tragedies, failed reconstructions, and a wilderness that grows back faster than a man can clear it. There is a specific kind of static in the air, a low-frequency hum, that suggests the distinction between the past and the present has worn thin. These 10 towns are places where the geography feels haunted by more than just ghosts. They are haunted by the very ground itself, which has seen too much and forgotten too little. 1. Rodney, the town the river rejected. Rodney was once a contender for the capital of Mississippi, a bustling river port where the elite of the South came to trade cotton and social standing. Then, the Mississippi River shifted its course, moving miles away and leaving the town to rot in a stagnant swamp. The off energy in Rodney is a form of aquatic abandonment. The most iconic image is the Presbyterian Church, with a literal cannonball from the Civil War still embedded in its brickwork. Walking through Rodney feels like walking through an outdoor morgue. The town didn't die because of a fire or a plague. It died because the earth moved, and that sense of geological betrayal lingers. The air is thick with the smell of river mud and rotting cypress. Because the town is now essentially a swamp, the sounds are distorted. The croak of a bullfrog or the splash of an alligator in the nearby dead water sounds unervingly like a human voice. It is a place that feels sunken, even though it is above ground, a town that the state seems to have collectively decided to let the forest reclaim. The humidity here functions as a preservative for the town's decay, wrapping the vine-choked ruins in a warm, wet blanket that smells of anaerobic soil. When you step off the gravel road and into the silence of the town square, you realize the river hasn't truly left. It has just transformed into a ghost that haunts the low-lying fog. The trees here don't look like they are growing. They look like they are winning, their roots slowly prying apart the foundations of once stately homes. There is a profound sense of geographic rejection, as if the Mississippi River deliberately shrugged the town off its shoulders, leaving Rodney to drown in the stillness of its own isolation. 2. Satartia, the Sulfur Breath. Satartia is a tiny village sitting on the edge of the Yazoo River, and it is perhaps the most chemically off location in the state. In 2020, a CO2 pipeline ruptured nearby, sending a green, odorless cloud over the town that left residents wandering in a daze, unable to breathe or think. Even before the pipeline incident, Satartia possessed a wrong vibe. It sits in the shadow of the Luss Bluffs, where the delta begins its transition into the hills. The town feels like it is caught in a permanent state of respiratory distress. There is a metallic, sulfurous quality to the air that makes your throat itch and your eyes water. The architecture is a collection of sagging porches and rusted tin roofs that seem to be sliding toward the river. Locals are famously wary of outsiders, not out of malice, but out of a shared, weary trauma. It is the kind of place where you feel like the oxygen itself is a limited resource. Satartia is a town that feels like a laboratory experiment that went wrong and was simply left to simmer in the heat. The town's positioning at the base of the bluffs creates a natural basin where heavy gases and stagnant air pool like water. This physical reality translates into a psychic weight. Standing in the center of the village, you feel a distinct pressure behind your eyes. The river here doesn't flow so much as it undulates, a thick, tea-colored sludge that carries the runoff of 1,000 industrial farms. There is a biological unease to Satartia, a feeling that the very molecules of the place are unstable. It is a town of lingering whispers and short breaths, where the landscape seems to be slowly exhaling a history of toxic neglect that the modern world would rather forget. 3. Port Gibson, the town too beautiful to burn. Ulysses S. Grant famously said that Port Gibson was too beautiful to burn during his march to Vicksburg. While this saved the town's antebellum architecture, it created a psychological stuckness that is hard to ignore. The off feeling in Port Gibson is a sense of ceremonial dread. The town is home to the famous First Presbyterian Church, which has a giant gold hand pointing toward heaven on its steeple. It looks less like a religious symbol and more like an accusation. The town feels like a museum where the janitors have gone missing. The grand mansions are beautiful, but they possess a hollow energy, as if the life was sucked out of them over a century ago and replaced with sawdust and silence. There is a palpable tension between the stunning aesthetics and the underlying poverty of the region. Driving through Port Gibson at dusk, you get the feeling that the buildings are watching you, judging your modern intrusion into their preserved, decaying world. It is a place where beauty feels like a trap. The gold hand atop the church steeple catches the fading sunlight in a way that feels almost predatory, its finger pointing upward with a rigid, unnatural intensity. As night falls, the white columned porches of the mansion seem to recede into the dark, leaving only the eyes of the window panes to track your progress. The town is suffocatingly elegant, yet the air carries a chill that defies the southern heat. It feels as though the town's survival was a bargain made with time itself, and now Port Gibson is forced to remain in a state of perpetual frozen perfection. To stay here too long is to feel your own pulse slow down, as if you are being integrated into the town's silent, aristocratic inventory. 4. Shukwaulak, the grid of echoes. Shukwaulak, pronounced Sugarlock, is a small town in Noxubee County that feels like it was designed by someone who had never seen a human settlement before. The layout is erratic, and the silence is so profound it feels like a physical weight. The wrong vibe here is one of acoustic isolation. In most towns, you hear the distant sound of a highway or a lawnmower, but in Shukwaulak, the air is dead. This creates a sensation where every footstep you take feels like it's being broadcast to the entire county. The town was once a thriving rail hub, but now the tracks feel like a scar running through a corpse. There is a persistent rumor of the Shukwaulak shadow, a localized phenomenon where people report seeing movement out of the corner of their eye in broad daylight. The town feels depleted, as if the very atoms that make up the buildings are losing their cohesion. It is the most uncomfortable feeling in the state because it lacks a specific cause. It's just a pervasive, vibrating sense of not right. The geometry of Shukwaulak is its own kind of nightmare. Roads seem to lead toward the center of town only to dissolve into overgrown fields or dead ends that face blank, windowless walls. This spatial confusion triggers a low-level flight response in the primitive brain. When a vehicle does pass through, the sound doesn't echo. It is swallowed instantly by the surrounding pine forests, leaving a vacuum in its wake. The shadow isn't just a ghost story. It is the visual manifestation of the town's thinning reality. Visitors often report a feeling of unbelonging, as if they have stepped into a pocket of existence that is slowly being erased from the map by a quiet, patient void. 5. Yazoo City, the Witch's Revenge. Yazoo City is famous for the legend of the Witch of Yazoo, who allegedly burned the town down in 1904. The town is split between the flat, fertile delta and the steep, jagged hills, creating a geographical schizophrenia. The off-energy in Yazoo City is one of cyclical disaster. The town has been destroyed by fire, flooded by the river, and torn apart by tornadoes more times than seems statistically possible. This creates a feeling of doomed resilience. The colorful buildings of the downtown area, known as New Orleans style, look like a cheerful mask over a face that has seen too much horror. In the Glenwood Cemetery, the witch's grave is surrounded by heavy chain link, which legend says she broke on the day the town burned. The atmosphere is one of waiting for the next fire, the next flood, or the next curse to manifest. Yazoo City feels like a place where the ground is actively trying to shake off the people living on it. The transition from the flat delta into the jagged hills is so abrupt that it causes a literal sense of vertigo. In the hills, the houses cling to the ridges with a desperate, precarious energy, while below, the town lies like a target for the elements. The humidity in Yazoo City feels charged, as if the air is carrying the static of an approaching storm even when the sky is clear. There is a cultural obsession with the witch legend that feels less like folklore and more like a collective acknowledgement of a lingering, vengeful presence. It is a town that lives in the shadow of its own destruction, where every siren or crack of thunder feels like the beginning of the end. 6. Mound Bayou, the island of lost ambition. Mound Bayou was founded as an independent all-black colony by former slaves, a promised land in the heart of the Jim Crow South. While its history is inspiring, the current state of the town is one of echoing melancholy. The wrongness here is the ghost of a dream. The town was once a self-sufficient utopia with its own banks, hospitals, and newspapers. Today, the ruins of these grand institutions stand as monuments to a future that was systematically strangled by outside forces. Standing in the center of town, you can feel the immense psychic energy that went into building this place and the subsequent sourness of its decline. It doesn't feel abandoned in the traditional sense. It feels interrupted. The wind through the Delta cotton fields carries a sound that locals call the whisper, a collective sigh of a million thwarted ambitions. It is a place where the pride is still visible, but it is a bruised, defensive pride that makes an outsider feel like a witness to a crime that is still being committed. The architectural remains in Mound Bayou, like the hollowed-out shell of the Tabrian Hospital, act as physical scars on the landscape. There is a specific frequency to the silence here. It isn't the empty silence of the wilderness, but a crowded, heavy silence packed with the voices of those who defied the impossible only to be met with the inevitable. As you walk the streets, the sense of potential energy is overwhelming, as if the town is a clock that stopped at 5 minutes to midnight. It feels like a place where time has curdled, leaving the residents to navigate a reality that is haunted by the magnificent shadow of what should have been. To visit Mound Bayou is to confront a profound, historical heartbreak that the Delta sun can never quite bleach away. 7. Natchez, the vertical aristocracy. Natchez has the highest concentration of antebellum mansions in the country. It is built on high bluffs overlooking the Mississippi River, creating a literal above and below social structure. The off-vibe in Natchez is class-based claustrophobia. The town is obsessed with its own history, particularly the Natchez pilgrimage, where people dress in hoop skirts and recreate the 1850s. This creates an uncanny valley effect where the line between historical reenactment and genuine delusion becomes blurred. The mansions, like Longwood, a massive, octagonal villa that was never finished, feel like architectural hallucinations. Longwood, with its upper floors left as bare studs and tool chests from 1861, is particularly unsettling. It feels as though the workers just stepped out for a lunch break 160 years ago. In Natchez, the past isn't just present, it is dominant, and it demands that you play a role in its ongoing grand theater of the dead. The geography of the bluffs adds a layer of spatial anxiety. The sheer drop to Natchez under the hill creates a feeling of precariousness, as if the town's high society facade could slide into the muddy river at any moment. The Spanish moss hangs from the live oaks like tattered funeral shrouds, dampening the light and muffling the sound of the modern world. Inside the grand homes, the air is thick with the scent of floor wax and old perfume, creating a sensory overload that mimics a fever dream. You aren't just looking at antiques. You are being invited into a shared ancestral haunting. Natchez is a town that refuses to grieve, choosing instead to live in a gilded taxidermy of a century that died a long, violent death, leaving the visitor feeling like an unwanted ghost in someone else's memory. 8. Corinth, the Crossroads of the Damned. Corinth was a vital railroad junction during the Civil War, and the crossing is the heart of the town. Because of its strategic importance, the ground here was soaked in the blood of thousands. The wrong feeling in Corinth is geographical trauma. The town feels like a place where the air never quite cleared after the smoke of the cannons drifted away. There are parks and monuments everywhere, but they don't feel like memorials. They feel like markers for things that are still there. Many visitors report a thrumming sensation in their feet when they stand near the railroad crossing, a vibration that doesn't match the schedule of the trains. The architecture is a mix of Victorian elegance and stark, modern utility, creating a disjointed aesthetic. Corinth feels like a town that is trying very hard to be a normal American community, but the static of the 1860s keeps bleeding through the frequency. The literal intersection of the tracks creates a psychic X, marks the spot, a focal point for the residual energy of the thousands who fought and died for this specific patch of dirt. Walking through the National Cemetery, the sheer uniformity of the stones feels like a silent army waiting for a command that will never come. The modern storefronts nearby seem flimsy and temporary compared to the heavy, historical density of the earth beneath them. There is a persistent hum in Corinth that sounds like a distant, chaotic crowd, often heard just at the edge of hearing during the quiet hours of the night. It is a town built on a foundation of conflict, where the peace feels like a thin, fragile sheet of glass laid over a gaping, unhealed wound. 9. Ocean Springs, the Artful Decay. Ocean Springs is a beautiful, artistic coastal town, but it has a wrong energy that stems from its relationship with the Gulf of Mexico. It is a town that is perpetually being rearranged by hurricanes. The off factor here is liquid instability. After Hurricane Katrina, the town was essentially rebuilt, but the ghost line of the water is still visible on the trees and the older structures. This creates a feeling of temporary existence. The residents are vibrant and creative, but there is a frantic quality to the art and the nightlife. A party at the end of the world vibe. The lush, tropical vegetation feels like it's growing too fast, as if it's trying to cover up the scars of the last storm before the next one arrives. Ocean Springs is a beautiful place, but it's the beauty of a sunset before a tidal wave. It is a town that knows it is on borrowed time, and that knowledge creates a vibrational anxiety that lingers just beneath the surface of the coastal charm. This environmental trauma has birthed a community that feels hyper-alive, yet fundamentally untethered. The salt air doesn't just corrode the metal on the piers. It seems to eat away at the permanence of the architecture, making every new building feel like a placeholder for the next disaster. When the tide comes in at night, the sound of the water against the pilings carries a rhythmic, predatory intent that contrasts sharply with the jazz and laughter emanating from the bars on Government Street. It is a town where people create masterpieces on canvases that they know could be underwater by next September. This tension produces a high-definition reality that is beautiful but exhausting, a sensory overload that masks the deep, oceanic dread of a town that is slowly being reclaimed by the Gulf. 10. Clarksdale, the Crossroads Contract. Clarksdale is the home of the blues, the place where Robert Johnson allegedly sold his soul to the devil at the crossroads of Highway 61 and 49. The off vibe in Clarksdale is spiritual exhaustion. The town is a pilgrimage site for blues fans, but the reality of the town is one of deep, rhythmic poverty and a sense of cosmic debt. The crossroads themselves are now a busy intersection with a sign, but the real crossroads are felt in the atmosphere of the juke joints. Places like Ground Zero or Reds feel like they are powered by an energy that isn't entirely human. There is a gravity in Clarksdale that pulls you down. Your movements become slower, your thoughts more melancholy. It is a town that has traded its soul for a legacy, and you can feel the terms of that contract in every cracked sidewalk and every note of a harmonica echoing down a dark alley. It is a place of profound, beautiful wrongness that stays in your bones like a fever. The geography of Clarksdale is a flat, infinite expanse of delta soil that seems to swallow the horizon, making the town feel like an island in a sea of mud and cotton. The heat here is sentient. It settles over the streets like a thick, wet wool blanket, muffling the sounds of the modern world until all that remains is the low, distorted growl of an amplifier. Tourists come looking for a myth, but they often leave with a heavy, unexplainable sadness that feels inherited from the land itself. The bargain made at the crossroads wasn't just for one man. It feels like it was for the entire region, a deal that ensured immortality through music but demanded a price of perpetual, weary stagnation. In Clarksdale, the air is thick with the scent of wood smoke and rain, and the shadows in the cotton warehouses feel like they are waiting for the bill to finally come due. The kudzu's patient watch. To travel through small-town Mississippi is to realize that the off energy isn't an anomaly, it is the baseline. The state is a palimpsest where every new layer of history is written over a previous one that hasn't quite dried yet. Whether it is the chemical dread of Satartia or the architectural haunting of Port Gibson, these towns serve as reminders that the land has its own agenda.